The single Apache woman said, "You're bigger than my home." And the giant rancher wept in silence. He was a man people noticed the moment he stepped into town. Not because he tried to be seen, but because his size made it impossible to ignore him. He was taller than most doorways and broader than most men the town had ever known. His hands were large, rough from years of ranch work, and his shoulders looked like they carried more than just muscle. People called him the giant rancher, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with quiet discomfort. Few people ever used his real name, and even fewer ever asked him about his life. He lived on a ranch far from the center of town, where the land stretched wide and empty. The open field suited him. Out there, his size did not feel like a problem. The sky was big, the land was honest, and animals did not judge. His days began before sunrise. He fed the horses, checked the fences, repaired what storms had damaged, and worked until his body was tired enough to quiet his thoughts. Silence followed him like a shadow, and he accepted it as part of who he was. In town, things were different. Chairs creaked when he sat. Door frames felt too low. People stared, then looked away too quickly. Some spoke loudly to him as if size meant weakness of hearing. Others avoided him altogether. Over time, he learned to keep his head down, to speak only when needed, and to leave places before he felt like he took up too much space. He never complained. He had learned long ago that the world rarely adjusted for people who did not fit easily. On the edge of the same land lived a single Apache woman. Her home was small, built with care rather than wealth. It stood quietly, surrounded by the memory of generations who had walked that land before her. She lived alone, not because she was lonely, but because she was strong enough to stand on her own. Her life was shaped by responsibility, culture, and a deep respect for the ground beneath her feet. She woke early too, not from habit alone, but from purpose. She kept her home neat, her yard clean, and her days meaningful. She knew the names of plants, the direction of winds, and the stories tied to certain hills and trees. To her, land was not something to own, but something to honor. People in town knew her, but not well. Some greeted her politely, others kept their distance. She was used to that. She had learned to be comfortable with quiet and to trust actions more than words. Their paths crossed first in the most ordinary way. The rancher's truck had broken down near her property line. He tried to fix it himself, but one of the parts refused to cooperate. He stood beside the truck longer than he meant to, thinking through his options. He did not like asking for help. It always came with looks and comments, even when people were kind. The woman noticed him from a distance. She saw a large man standing still, not angry, not impatient, just thoughtful. She walked over slowly, careful not to startle him. When she spoke, her voice was calm and respectful. She asked if he needed help. He turned, surprised. Most people did not approach him so easily. He nodded and explained the problem in a low, measured voice. He did not exaggerate or complain. He simply stated the facts. She listened closely, then offered a simple solution, one that involved a tool she had in her shed. He hesitated, then accepted. She returned with the tool, and together they worked in quiet cooperation. Their movements did not clash. They did not rush. When the truck finally started again, he thanked her, meaning it more deeply than his words could show. That should have been the end of it, a small moment forgotten by most, but it was. Over the next few weeks, small interactions followed, a wave from a distance, a nod, a brief exchange of words about weather or land. Neither pushed for more. There was no urgency, no pressure. Just a growing sense of familiarity that felt safe. The rancher noticed something about her that others might miss. She never stared at him. She never adjusted her tone. She spoke to him the same way she spoke to anyone else. That alone made him feel lighter, though he could not explain why. For the woman, there was something in the way he listened that felt rare. When she spoke, he gave her his full attention. He did not interrupt or rush her words. His silence was not empty, it was respectful. She sensed that his size had made people decide things about him before he ever opened his mouth. One afternoon, she asked if he could help her fix a section of fence that had been damaged by a storm. She was capable, but the work would go faster with his strength. He agreed immediately, almost relieved to be useful without explanation. When he arrived at her home, he slowed his steps. The house was smaller than most places he entered. He removed his boots carefully, as if the floor might protest under his weight. He ducked slightly without realizing it. He was used to making himself smaller wherever he went. She noticed all of this, though she said nothing at first. She watched how carefully he moved, how aware he was of the space around him. It told her more about him than any story could. They worked on the fence together, side by side. He lifted heavy posts with ease, but he did not rush. She aligned the wood and secured it with practiced hands. The sun moved slowly across the sky and the work felt steady and calm. When they finished, she invited him inside for water. He hesitated again, glancing at the doorway. She smiled gently and told him it was fine. He stepped inside, shoulders nearly brushing the walls. He looked around, unsure where to stand. Then she said it softly, without laughter or judgment. "You're bigger than my home." The words landed in the quiet space between them. For a moment he froze. His first instinct was to apologize. That had always been his response, to make himself responsible for taking up space. But she wasn't upset. Her expression was warm, almost thoughtful. She wasn't pointing out a problem. She was stating a truth. Something inside him shifted. He let out a small, surprised breath that almost became a laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was honest. No one had ever said it like that before. No teasing, no discomfort, just acknowledgement. He nodded, unsure what to say. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he had to shrink himself. He simply stood there, present. She handed him water and they talked a little longer, about the fence, about the land, about how storms were changing. Simple things. But beneath the simplicity, something deeper had begun. When he left that day, he walked back to his truck slower than usual. The land looked the same, but he felt different. A small crack had formed in the quiet wall he had built around himself. Neither of them knew it yet, but that ordinary day had marked the beginning of something that would. The giant rancher woke before sunrise, worked with his animals, and spent long hours repairing land that never truly rested. From the outside, nothing looked different. But inside him, the woman's calm words stayed alive, repeating themselves in moments when his thoughts slowed. He found himself remembering how easily she had spoken, how her voice held no fear or discomfort. It unsettled him in a gentle way. He had lived most of his life learning how to make himself smaller. He walked carefully, spoke softly, and stood at the edges of rooms. Even alone, he often felt like he was too much. That feeling had shaped him for years, hardening into a quiet habit. But now, when he worked under the open sky, he caught himself standing straighter. He did not know why. He only knew that something inside him felt less heavy. The woman noticed changes too, though hers were more subtle. She went about her days as she always had, tending to her home, caring for the land, and keeping her routine steady. But now, when she looked toward the fence line or heard a truck in the distance, she paused for a moment longer than before. It was not longing, it was awareness. She had spent her life trusting her instincts, and her instincts told her that the quiet man carried more weight than he showed. Their meetings continued naturally. Sometimes it was the rancher passing by with supplies. Sometimes it was her stopping to return a tool she had borrowed. They never forced conversation. They let silence do its work. In that silence, they learned each other's presence. He learned that she noticed small details. She learned that he remembered things she mentioned only once. One afternoon, she brought him a small bundle of dried herbs she had gathered herself. She told him they were good for sore muscles. He accepted them with care, as if she had handed him something fragile. No one had ever given him something like that before. He thanked her, his voice steady but low. That night, he used the herbs after a long day's work and felt comfort in knowing someone had thought of him. The rancher began to help her more often. He fixed a loose gate. He cleared fallen branches after a strong wind. He never assumed. He always asked. She appreciated that more than she said. Too often, people mistook help for control. With him, help came with respect. They talked more now, though still slowly. She shared stories about her childhood, about elders who taught her to listen before speaking. She spoke of traditions tied to the land, lessons passed through actions rather than books. He listened deeply, asking careful questions. He did not treat her stories as curiosities. He treated them as truth. In return, he shared pieces of his own life. Not all at once, just enough. He spoke about growing up larger than everyone else, about learning early that strength made people uneasy. He talked about leaving places because he felt like he disrupted them simply by existing. He did not blame anyone. He simply spoke honestly. She understood more than he realized. She had seen how the world labeled people before knowing them. She had felt that weight herself, though in different ways. Listening to him, she recognized a familiar loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being unseen. One evening, she invited him to sit outside her home as the sun lowered. They did not go inside. They stayed where the land stretched wide and the sky held space for both of them. They sat a comfortable distance apart, neither crowding the other. She spoke about the idea of home, not just a building but a feeling. She said a true home does not shrink a person. It does not ask them to bend or apologize. It allows them to exist fully. He stared out at the horizon as she spoke. Her words reached places he had never named. He realized that for most of his life he had mistaken shelter for home. He had built walls to protect himself, but they had also kept him separate. The conversation drifted, then settled into quiet. The sound of the wind filled the space. He felt calm in a way that surprised him. Usually, silence brought his thoughts crashing in. This silence held them gently. As weeks passed, their connection deepened without pressure. They did not define it. They did not rush it. They allowed it to grow in its own time. Others in town noticed them occasionally, but neither paid much attention. What mattered existed between them, not around them. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in faster than expected. Heavy rain hit the land hard. The rancher worried about her home, knowing how storms could damage small structures. As soon as the rain slowed, he drove over to check on her. She was already outside, inspecting the area. Part of her roof had shifted slightly, and water had leaked inside. She remained calm, assessing what needed to be done. When she saw him, she nodded, grateful but unsurprised. They worked together under gray skies. He climbed carefully, adjusting the roof with steady hands. She passed tools and secured materials from below. Rain soaked their clothes, but neither complained. The work mattered more. When it was done, she thanked him. He shook his head, saying it was nothing. But she looked at him seriously and said that help given without pride always mattered. They stood there for a moment, rain dripping from their clothes, the land quiet after the storm. He felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, not sadness, recognition. Later that night, back at his ranch, he sat alone longer than usual. The quiet pressed in, but this time it did not feel empty. He thought about her words, her steadiness, the way she never asked him to be less. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the weight of emotions he had buried. He did not name them. He simply let them exist. He realized then that meeting her had begun to change the way he saw himself. Not because she praised him, not because she needed him, but because she treated him as someone who belonged. Neither of them spoke about what was growing between them. They didn't need to. Something strong was forming, built on patience, trust, and quiet understanding. And though neither could see where it would lead, both felt certain of one thing: whatever came next would matter. Time moved forward in small, steady steps. Nothing dramatic happened. Yet everything felt different. The rancher and the woman had fallen into a quiet rhythm that felt natural to both of them. Their meetings were no longer accidental. They did not call them visits, but somehow they always found reasons to be near each other. Some mornings, the rancher would ride along the fence line and see her working in her yard. He would lift a hand in greeting, and she would nod back, her face calm but warm. Other days she would walk part of the land near his ranch, collecting plants or simply observing the ground. When their paths crossed, they walked together for a while, talking about simple things: the weather, the animals, the way the land changed with the seasons. Their conversations grew deeper without either of them noticing when it happened. She spoke more about her past now. She told him about losing family members, about learning early how to rely on herself. She spoke of moments when she felt strong and moments when she felt tired but kept going anyway. She did not speak with bitterness. She spoke with honesty. The rancher listened, his attention steady. He never rushed her stories. When she paused, he waited. When she finished, he did not try to fix anything. He simply acknowledged what she shared. That alone made her feel understood. Slowly, he began to open up more too. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky darken, he spoke about his childhood. He talked about being taller than everyone else by a young age. He described how teachers asked him to sit in the back, how other children kept their distance, unsure of him. He explained how he learned to keep his emotions quiet because people already expected too much from him. He admitted something he had never said out loud before. He said that sometimes he felt like a problem that needed to be managed. That even kindness from others often came with discomfort. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she did not respond right away. She let the silence settle, then told him that being different did not make him a burden. She said the world often struggled with things it did not understand, and that did not mean those things were wrong. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He felt them sink deep into him, reaching places that had long been closed off. As trust grew, they began working together more often. He helped her with tasks that required strength. She helped him with things that required patience and careful thought. They balanced each other without trying to. One afternoon, she showed him how she prepared certain plants for use. She explained their purposes, not as medicine, but as knowledge passed down through generations. He watched closely, respecting the process. He did not treat it as something strange or outdated. He treated it as wisdom. In return, he taught her how to work with horses in a way that focused on calm rather than control. He showed her how animals responded better to quiet confidence than force. She noticed how gentle he was with creatures much smaller than himself. It revealed a side of him few people ever saw. They laughed more now, not loudly but freely. Small moments brought smiles. Shared effort created comfort. Their connection deepened in ways neither tried to define. Still, there were moments when the weight of the world crept back in. One day, while they were in town at the same time, the rancher overheard whispers. People watched them together with curiosity and judgment. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Old habits stirred. He began to pull away, becoming quieter again. She noticed immediately. When they walked back toward the land, she asked him what was wrong. He hesitated, then admitted that being seen made him uncomfortable. He feared becoming a topic rather than a person. She stopped walking and faced him. She told him that people would always talk, but their words did not get to decide his worth. She reminded him that he did not need permission to exist fully. Her steadiness grounded him. He realized how often he had let others shape his behavior. Standing there with her, he felt the strength to resist that pull, even if only a little. As summer moved toward its end, the land changed color. The air cooled. Work shifted. They continued to share time, but something unspoken hovered between them. A sense that things were moving toward a moment neither could predict. One evening, after a long day, they sat near a small fire outside her home. The flames flickered softly. The quiet felt heavier than usual, filled with thoughts neither spoke. She broke the silence by asking him if he ever wished his life had been different. The question caught him off guard. He thought carefully before answering. He said that for a long time he wished he could disappear into normality, that he could be average, that he could move through spaces unnoticed. Then he paused. He looked at her and said that lately those wishes felt weaker. That meeting her had made him question whether disappearing was really what he wanted. Her eyes softened at his honesty. She told him that she had spent much of her life standing firm when the world tried to push her aside. That it had not been easy, but it had made her strong in ways she valued. They sat quietly again, the fire crackling between them. The night air wrapped around them gently. He felt something rise in his chest, a mix of fear and hope. Emotions he had avoided for years surfaced, demanding attention. Later, as he stood to leave, he hesitated. Words pressed against his throat, but he did not force them out. Instead, he simply thanked her for listening. She nodded, understanding more than he said. That night alone at his ranch, he could not sleep. He replayed moments in his mind, her voice, her calm presence, the way she saw him without shrinking away. He realized that what he felt was no longer just comfort. It was connection, deep and meaningful. At the same time, she lay awake in her own home, thinking too. She reflected on how his presence had become a steady part of her life, how his quiet respect made her feel safe, how his strength, paired with gentleness, felt rare and valuable. Neither of them named what was growing. They did not need to, but both sensed that they were approaching a moment where silence would no longer be enough. The land outside rested under the stars, holding their stories without judgment. And somewhere between shared work, quiet conversations, and unspoken understanding, two lives were moving closer together, shaped not by force or urgency, but by patience and truth. The change did not arrive suddenly. It came slowly, like a shadow stretching longer as the sun lowered. Both of them felt it, even if neither spoke about it. The quiet between them had grown heavier, not uncomfortable but full. It carried things unsaid, memories waking up, feelings pressing closer to the surface. The rancher found himself more thoughtful during his workdays. Tasks that once kept his mind busy now left space for reflection. As he repaired fences or guided horses across the land, his thoughts returned again and again to the woman. He remembered the way she listened without judgment, the calm strength in her posture, the honesty in her eyes. He realized that being around her had allowed him to feel something he had avoided for years: vulnerability. That realization frightened him. For most of his life, he had survived by staying closed. He believed that if he stayed quiet and strong, nothing could reach him. But now, cracks had formed in that wall, and with those cracks came memories he had buried deep. One afternoon, as he worked alone near the edge of his land, he remembered moments from his past he rarely allowed himself to think about. Times when people had laughed nervously around him. Times when doors had closed quietly behind him. Times when kindness had been mixed with fear. He remembered learning early that his size made people uneasy, and how he had taken responsibility for that unease, even though it was never truly his burden. That weight had shaped his entire life. Later that day, he went to see the woman. He did not have a reason, or maybe he did, but he could not name it. She was outside, tending to something near her home. When she saw him, she greeted him with the same calm warmth she always did. They sat together, watching the sky shift colors as evening approached. At first, they spoke about small things, work that needed doing, weather changes, the land. But the rancher was quieter than usual. His hands rested heavily on his knees, his shoulders tense. She noticed. She did not push. She waited. Eventually, he spoke. His voice was low, careful. He said that sometimes he felt tired in a way sleep did not fix, that carrying himself through the world had always required effort. He admitted that being seen scared him. Not because he feared people, but because he feared being misunderstood yet again. She listened closely. Her face remained calm, but her eyes held understanding. When he paused, she asked him something simple but direct. She asked him who he felt he had to be in order to survive. The question stopped him. He thought for a long moment. Then he answered honestly. He said he felt he had to be strong at all times, silent, controlled, unmoving. He said he believed that showing pain would only make people uncomfortable or worse, afraid. She nodded slowly. Then she said something that reached him deeper than he expected. She said that strength did not disappear when pain was acknowledged. She said that carrying everything alone did not make someone noble, it only made them tired. Her words stirred something inside him. A tightness formed in his chest. His breathing grew heavier, though he tried to control it. He turned his face slightly away, embarrassed by the sudden rise of emotion. She did not move closer. She did not speak right away. She gave him space, honoring his struggle. Then she spoke softly. She said she understood what it meant to carry identity like armor. She said that, as an Apache woman living alone, she had faced her own forms of judgment. That people often assumed weakness or stubbornness without knowing her story. She said she had learned to stand firm without becoming hard. That was when the weight finally broke through him. The rancher's hands trembled slightly. His jaw tightened. He stared at the ground, fighting the emotions rising in his chest. Years of holding everything in place had taken their toll. Memories, loneliness, and unspoken pain surfaced all at once. He turned away from her completely, ashamed of what was happening. His shoulders shook as silent tears fell. He did not make a sound. He did not want to burden her with his weakness, but she understood. She did not rush to him. She did not touch him. She simply remained where she was, steady and present. Her silence was not distance. It was respect. In that moment, the rancher wept in silence, not from sadness alone, but from release, from finally allowing himself to feel what he had locked away for so long. The tears carried years of loneliness, of being too large for spaces that were never built with him in mind. After some time, his breathing steadied. He wiped his face slowly, embarrassed but relieved. He expected her to look away or change the subject. Instead, she looked at him with the same calm respect she always had. She told him quietly that tears did not make him smaller. She said they showed he was human, and that being human was not something to apologize for. Those words stayed with him. As the evening grew darker, they sat together without speaking. The silence felt different now. Lighter, honest. Something between them had shifted. A wall had come down, not with force but with trust. Over the following days, the rancher noticed changes in himself. He still worked hard. He was still quiet. But he no longer felt the same need to disappear. He allowed himself to take up space, even if only a little. He stood straighter, he breathed deeper. The woman noticed too. She saw the way his posture changed, the way his eyes held less tension. She knew that what he had shared with her was not small. It was a gift of trust. Their bond deepened after that day. They did not talk about it directly, but it was there, shaping their interactions. He felt safer around her. She felt closer to him. They continued to work together, to share quiet moments, to exist side by side without pressure. One evening, as they walked along the land, she spoke about how healing did not always come in loud moments. Sometimes, she said, it came quietly, through being seen and accepted. He nodded. He understood that now. As the season continued to change, the land reflected their journey. Leaves shifted color. The air cooled. Things let go of what they no longer needed. The rancher realized that for the first time in his life, he did not feel alone inside himself. He had not changed who he was. He had simply allowed someone to see him fully. And in that shared understanding, something strong and steady had taken root. The days that followed felt quieter but fuller. Something important had settled between them, like the land after a long rain. Nothing needed to be explained. Nothing needed to be rushed. What had been shared was enough to change the shape of their lives. The rancher returned to his work with a different kind of calm. His routine stayed the same, but the weight he carried felt lighter. When he moved through the land now, he no longer felt like he was intruding on space that was not meant for him. He belonged here. The animals sensed the change too. Horses responded to him with ease. His movements felt more natural, less guarded. Sometimes, while repairing a fence or walking the fields, he thought back to the moment he had turned away and let his tears fall. He did not feel shame anymore. Instead, he felt gratitude. That moment had not made him weaker. It had made him honest. And honesty, he realized, took more courage than silence ever had. The woman noticed the change right away. When he came by to help or simply to talk, his presence felt steadier. He still spoke little, but his silence no longer felt like distance. It felt like peace. She could see that he was standing more openly in the world, no longer folding himself inward. Their connection continued to grow, not through grand gestures but through shared days. They worked together often now. Some days they fixed things. Other days they simply walked the land, observing how it changed. They spoke about the past only when it felt right. They spoke about the future carefully, without pressure. One afternoon they found themselves sitting near the edge of her property, looking out over the open ground. The sky was wide and clear. The woman spoke about her ancestors, about how they believed land held memory, that it remembered footsteps, voices, and intentions. She said that the land knew when people walked it with respect. The rancher listened and then shared something in return. He said that for most of his life, he felt like land rejected him, like spaces were never made for someone his size. But here, with her, he felt accepted by the ground beneath his feet. She smiled at that. She told him that land did not judge size, only intention. As weeks turned into months, people in town began to notice them more. They were seen together sometimes, walking quietly, working side by side. There were looks. There were whispers. The rancher felt them, but they no longer controlled him. He had learned that being seen did not have to mean being harmed. The woman remained steady through it all. She had lived long enough knowing that others' opinions passed like weather. She did not confront it. She did not hide from it. She simply continued living with dignity. One day, a neighbor stopped the rancher and made a careless comment about his size and where he belonged. In the past, the rancher would have lowered his head and walked away. This time, he stood still. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply said that he belonged where he chose to stand. That night, when he told the woman about it, she listened and nodded. She said that choosing oneself was an act of strength. He felt proud, not because he had proven anything, but because he had protected his own worth. As the season shifted again, the land grew quieter. Work slowed. Evenings grew longer. One evening, as they stood outside her home, watching the sky darken, the rancher spoke about something he had been thinking about for a while. He said that for most of his life, he believed he had to stand alone to survive. That depending on someone felt dangerous. But now he understood that standing together did not mean losing oneself. It meant sharing the weight. The woman listened carefully. Then she told him that independence did not mean isolation, that strength could exist alongside connection. She said that two strong people could stand side by side without one overshadowing the other. Their words were simple, but the meaning behind them was deep. They did not label what they were. They did not rush into promises. They simply allowed their lives to move forward together naturally, honestly. Some days were quiet. Some days were full, but all days felt real. One morning, the rancher helped her repair part of her home again. As he stood inside, careful as always, she looked at him and smiled softly. She reminded him of what she had said months ago, about him being bigger than her home. This time, her words carried a different meaning. She said that homes could grow. The rancher felt something warm settle in his chest. He realized that home was no longer about walls or size. It was about where he was allowed to exist fully without apology. As time passed, they became part of each other's routines. He brought fresh supplies. She shared knowledge and stories. They supported each other through challenges without needing to fix everything. Their bond was built on trust, not expectation. One evening, as they stood together under a wide sky, the rancher felt tears rise again. But this time they were not hidden. They were quiet, honest, and free. He did not turn away. The woman stood beside him, not to comfort but to share the moment. Two people, different in size and story, standing on the same ground. The giant rancher no longer felt too big for the world, and the single Apache woman no longer felt alone in carrying her strength. Together, they had found something rare and lasting, not perfection, not certainty, but understanding, and that, they both knew, was enough.